So welcome everyone to today's Grow webinar. I'm excited to see so many dedicated small business owners and entrepreneurs here with us. We know that running a business can feel like a never-ending juggling act. Resilience, resourcefulness, and relentlessness becomes our daily mantra. Yet even the most determined of us can end up overwhelmed, under-resourced, and burning the candle at both ends. Well, today we're going to talk about the business owner and advice paradox. And our speaker today is going to shine a light on that very contradiction. Why does the small business leader who could benefit most from external guidance often are the ones that are the most unlikely to seek it? Well, we're going to unpack that. Why we hesitate to reach out to help even when we desperately need it. But there are so many hidden costs of going alone, and missed opportunities and stress builds, and profits can go down. So we're going to have some practical strategies from our speaker. And without further ado, I would love to introduce, again, coming to Grow, one of our advisors, Desmond Jordan. He has had many, many years opening businesses, 20 years actually, and has been influential in advising other business owners to help achieve their goals. Desmond's passion for helping businesses and their owners began many years ago in Glasgow, Scotland, and I'll let him tell the details a little bit more about that. And he hasn't forgotten what it's like to experience the ups and downs, and through his journeys has become quite experienced in helping our business owners like us today. So welcome, Desmond. Oh my goodness, I almost called you Jordan. I'm going to edit that out. Welcome, Desmond, to today's session to be our guest speaker. And to learn more about Desmond, you can reach him at resurgoconsulting.ca.
Most of you know me already. My name's Desmond Jordan, and I'm the founder of the Resurgo Consulting Group, your business success partners. Today, I want to talk about something that's become very apparent over the last, 4 or 5 years, and that's that business owners are often in need of advice because going it alone is tough, but they don't know where to find it or how to go about it, and they have lots of doubts about it. However, by holding themselves back, they may be damaging their business, and that's not something any of us like to see. So I'm going to try and make the case today that in business, to overcome the business owner advice paradox, two heads are often better than one. I'm very passionate about small business, and the good news is all of us are among the unsung heroes of Canada. And that seems a bit of a bold statement, but not when you consider some of the key facts. Together, we are the lifeblood of our economy. Small businesses generate 40% of private sector GDP. So that's everything that's not government. We employ the largest proportion of workers in the private sector each and every year, and we create the majority of new jobs every year. And that's not just new job opportunities, that means new jobs that have been created. And we're obviously critical to the grassroots innovation in Canada. But there's bad news too. We all know that being a business owner is tough. And in fact, the majority of businesses, that 65% approximately, fail within the first 5 to 10 years of business. And of those who don't fail, and I hate to be a downer, but it's the reality, and it's the harsh reality, many owners are still struggling. So even those businesses survive the first 5 to 10 years, often they're still struggling to generate the stable profits and cash flow that's needed for their business to fully thrive. So most business owners are not as successful as they would like to be, and they're not necessarily making the profits and income that they would like to. That's something that upsets us all, and it's something that can be avoided with some help. I certainly put the odds in your favor. Certainly, owning a business is a constant challenge. It's never easy. Even in the good economic times, There's always challenges, there's always problems. And business owners themselves are often the biggest asset in the business. But as they take on more and more responsibility, as their business grows, they can often feel a heavy burden of trying to do too much by themselves. And they can sometimes even become a bottleneck in their own company if they haven't managed to develop the systems in the business as well as the business growth itself. And then that starts to have a negative spiral downwards. There's lots of other business challenges, of course, we all know what they are, and they're different for each of us. People often think, oh, business owners all have the same problem. No, we have similar problems, but they're different depending on the skill sets you have, the experience you have, the financial capital you have, the industry you're in, and the time in the economic cycle. There's many other factors that make each of our challenges not necessarily totally unique, but certainly we all have our own custom combination of challenges. And if that's not hard enough, then obviously trying to do it on your own makes it even tougher. I've gone two slides there. No. So let's talk more about the business owner advice paradox. And what I'm really saying is that, as Laura said in the introduction, no one has all the skills to be the perfect business owner, and no one has the perfect business. So we all make the best of what we have. And oftentimes, because we're used to being self sufficient, we often continually look inwardly when perhaps there might be times we should look outwardly to get ideas, input, and advice. And so, because let's be honest, all of us in our own areas of specialization are pretty talented, and I know we're all hardworking and we're all very focused. But even the most talented entrepreneurs have knowledge and skill gaps. And on top of that, few owners are actually formally taught about business management and business success strategies. In fact, no one's really taught to be an entrepreneur, even though these days you can go to university for it and you can even get some classes in high school. And I think that's great, but it doesn't really replace the fact that you never know what you're going to face when you get into the real world of business ownership. And of course, the challenges change over time. So when you start out, you've got a certain set of challenges, you've got a certain set of skills. You make the most of the situation. That's probably the one time for sure you would expect to see owners having an up-to-date business plan, particularly if they're going for lending to the bank or somewhere to get their business launched. But once they get launched, it tends to be, and we often use the analogy of the little duck, they're trying to look like they've got it all under control when their little legs are going, pretty fast underneath the water just to keep above water, as it were, literally. So that's something that's just a fact, and most of us deal with it quite well. But it becomes more and more challenging to do that over the longer term, especially as the circumstances are changing and we're changing as well. We're gaining more knowledge, but we may be taking on more responsibility. We're developing our skills and bringing on staff, but maybe the challenges are growing faster than our ability to keep up, and that often leads to owner burnout and other challenges, as well as financial burnout, in the sense that even a growing business, in fact, one of the dangers of a growing business is the cash flow can get ahead of what the business can cope with, and you find a growing business in trouble. That's an example where you might wish you had taken some external perspective as you're putting together your plans to move forward. But that's something we'll talk more about. Ironically, and this is a real paradox, is that the owners who could benefit most from strategic help are often the ones who don't ask. And owners often, and we'll talk about the reasons why, there are many complex reasons why owners don't ask for help and tend to struggle along on their own. And we're all guilty of it, and it's a great positive attribute to be resilient, to be persistent, and those are certainly key to success. But there's a point where you may be wise to ask yourself, do I need a different input? Do I need a different perspective? Do I need different resources? Should I get a second opinion on some of the things I'm doing? And it's best to do that, of course, before you're under pressure, because when you're under pressure, it's more difficult to reach out. You might have less resources, and you certainly will have less time available to look at things more strategically. But there's always good news. And the good news is, in my own experience, and for those who don't know, I've owned six of my own small businesses here in Canada. I was able to acquire some of them, build some of them from scratch, and then successfully sell each one of them one after the other over 6 years. I would not recommend that level of intensity, and it was not easy. Sometimes people think, "Oh, it must be easy. You've done it more than once." Yes, it definitely gets easier. Definitely, your experience helps, but the challenges are substantial every time. And fortunately, I was successful overall, and that's one of the reasons I set up Circle Consulting, because I understand it from the solopreneur, the entrepreneur, the small business owner's perspective. And I'm very confident that the performance of most businesses can be improved, um, especially with the benefit of an external perspective, some coaching, some mentoring, and some advice. Because, as we all know, every owner has their weaknesses, they have their blind spots, and that, as well as limited time, limits their potential. The good news is, and this is the another example of the paradox, owners are quite resistant to let people look inside the business. They don't really want anyone to look under the hood. Um, and again, we'll talk about that in just a few moments, is why that is. But the good news is that the owners who do take advice rave about the substantial benefits. So we're going to talk a little bit, and it's hard to get specific numbers, but about 76% plus of business owners who were reluctant to take any external input, advice, coaching, actually said afterwards that they're glad they did it. And I think it was 86% said they would consider doing it again or would recommend it to someone else. The average business improvement over the following 12 months from taking, again, there's different types of coaching, there's different type of advice, but the average benefit was an increase of 25% in profitability. Changes in revenues are different because different sizes of businesses, but the ability to drive the advantages that they gained from getting a different perspective, but from bouncing ideas off someone else, from taking input and advice from specialists, helped them grow their bottom line by 25%. So clearly, it more than paid for itself. So that reluctance to take advice, married with the overwhelming positivity, assuming they get the right advisor, of course. Of course, there's many different types of business coaches and advisors out there. You've got to, of course, shop around and find the right one for your circumstances and one that's affordable. I will touch on affordability in just a minute. But that's that this reluctance on the one hand, and then the fact that owners often become raving fans afterwards is one of the other reasons for the ironic reality that we call the business owner advisor paradox. Before I go into this one, I do want to talk about costs. If you take on a business coach, a business advisor, business mentor, even join a mastermind or something like that, but more something that's more tailored towards you individually, specifically for your business, um, then cost is always an issue. And it's a big one for many owners, especially small owners, smaller budgets. But the fact matter is, you know for a fact, if you don't have the right coach or advisor, if the benefit they're able to bring you is not substantially more than any fees that you might pay. I know that's difficult to assess to begin with, but I just want to paperclip it and remind you that's something that you should be confident, or they should be confident in bringing you on board, that they're going to bring benefits to your business that are substantially more than any fees that would be paid. Now, of course, we focus on the financial element, both in terms of fees and in terms of performance. But of course, that's not the only benefit you get of getting the right coach advisor. Many people are happy with the level of profitability and income they're getting. They just want their time back. They want more time. They want to learn how to delegate better. They want to learn how they can evolve and scale their business, or they just want to know how they can become a better manager, how they can hire, empower and promote staff so that the business becomes less dependent on them, and they're actually able to enjoy the success that they've worked so hard to achieve. So, whilst I will focus mainly on financial things, I think it's important to understand that when I talk to my clients, when I talk about business owners, I'm not just looking at them as financial owners, I'm looking at them as individuals. And that comes back to one of the first conversations you would have with business advisors, coaches. The questions they should be asking you are, unless they're a specialist in the niche, let's say marketing, for example, but if they're more of a generalist, they should be asking questions like, who are you? What have you got in terms of your business, and where are you trying to get to? And those questions should relate not only to the business, but to you as an individual. What do you want out of this business? What is this business giving you that you want more of? Or what is this business not giving you think you deserve, which may be the opportunity to enjoy the financial success that you've managed to achieve? How can you maybe prepare the business to pass on to the next generation if that's one of your ambitions? How can you prepare the business to be certain that there's a contingency plan in place if you're getting older and there is always the possibility of something happening health wise, or just an accident happens? These are things that you might want the peace of mind. They may give you strategies about taking money out of the business in a tax efficient form. That's usually the work of your accountant, but often a good business coach advisor will be the bridge between the questions you might want to ask and your accountant. Or they may have strategies, general approaches, and say, yeah, this is a time in the evolution of your business journey when you should be looking to take money out of the business over time, because most of these things are best done through a planned strategy and not just an overnight decision. And unfortunately, it tends to be that business owners are reactionary, and that's the benefit of having two heads in the room to remind you, hey, there are other considerations you may want to think about. So let's look at this one here. So some of the key questions that I want to get into now are, why don't more business owners reach out for help, support, and advice? What are the negative consequences? And we've already started to talk about them. And it's not only um, the pressures that you may be under, and be under even more so, taking more and more burden on yourself for the performance of the business, both physically and mentally in many cases. And bear in mind also that even successful business owners have a whole set of challenges. So what are the negative consequences that an owner can face? And a lot of those are missed opportunities. If you think about every business can be improved with the right strategy. So if you don't have the right strategy in place, and we never have the perfect ones, but if you're not evolving your processes and systems for efficiencies, if you've not got best practices being reinforced, if you've not got standard operating procedures, even in a small business, then not only are you not necessarily making the profits you could today, but you're and facing maybe more stress and more work than you would like to do, but there is an opportunity cost for what might have been. So you may have been releasing more capital to enjoy personally, or you may have more capital that you can reinvest in the business and grow it more quickly, or you may be able to put better systems in place, and it will make the scaling of that business, and therefore the level of success that you can achieve, considerably higher. So if you don't take the steps to strengthen your business as you go along, then obviously those larger scale opportunities, because most small businesses don't become big businesses, but every big business, almost every big business, unless they were an aggregate of two small businesses, started off as a little business. We all know, like Hewlett Packard started in a garage. I think maybe even Bill Gates did with Microsoft, and so some of the biggest companies that we are aware of really have very humble beginnings, and they were once just as small as our little businesses are. So, and then of course we've already started to talk about some of the potential benefits owners can gain from suitable advice and support. So here's the nub of the market. Why don't business owners, if there are many compelling reasons, and there's an argument for financial efficiency and a good return of your investment, and that's the investment of not just your money, but also your time. if there's a clear need for coaching, if there's missed opportunities, if two-thirds of businesses fail within 10 years, I think that's a fair argument for saying that there's a strong case for at least considering some external coaching and advice. Now, let's be clear, a coach can't necessarily, they're not the owner of the business. They're not the one making the decisions. They're the one giving different perspectives, bringing added value. And I think a key word which I've used in previous presentations is no one can succeed on their own. So one of the things that a good coach advisor will bring is will deepen your ability to leverage. And leverage, again, we talked about before, is leveraging your existing knowledge and aggregating it with someone else who has, complementary knowledge, which would be your coach. And maybe that coach will bring in additional third-party specialists. It's also leveraging your existing customer base, leveraging your existing staff, developing your existing staff, training them, promoting them, hopefully retaining them, and getting mutual success through that way as well. So there's all of those positive cases for, but there's also a lot of caution and resistance, and some of them are logical and factual, but some of them are actually emotional. So first thing that you want to overcome if you're trying to help someone, or if you're an owner saying, I don't know. I don't think and the things that go through your head are, "Oh, I'm not big enough. I can't afford it. I don't need it. I can do it all myself." And behind each of those statements is an emotional, intellectual consideration. So first one is they have doubts and confusion about the cost, the benefits, and the value, right? So we all expect to pay a price, but we want to know what we're going to get for that money. But we also want to know how those benefits are going to roll out in the long term, and we want to know that we get value for what we're doing because we're giving up both time and money, and we're opening the door to things that a lot of people consider very private, our business and our business finances, which relates to our personal life and our personal finances sometimes. People are proud. You've gone out and set out on your own. It's a big statement to those who love and care from you, to your friends, maybe even from your enemies. Oh, he's gone out on his own. Maybe you worked for a boss and they weren't a great boss, and you decided, maybe it was for an HVAC company, and you decided, you know what, I think I can do a better job. I certainly can treat the customers better than that company did. I can deliver a more efficient service. I can deliver a more consistent, a better service. So you go out on your own. So obviously there comes with that an association of your personality with your business, and that's just a fact. It doesn't have to always be that way, closely aligned, but it generally is. So because of that, you've had to become an independent thinker, a self-starter, resilient. So often, especially if you've owned the business for some time, or you feel you're someone with a good degree of pride, rightfully so. Maybe you were, very successful in your career. Maybe you were a lawyer. Maybe you were high in the corporate ladder, as many people to become entrepreneurs were, or any other background, a technical expert in your field. Then you build this sense of resiliency, which is very positive and important, but it sometimes can get in the way of recognizing that you're not an expert at everything. So that pride and skepticism can have owners sometimes feel they don't need input or advice. Maybe they're being a bit overconfident, and or maybe they're just not ready. So it's something to be aware of within yourself and make sure it's not getting in the way of you reaching out for help when that's a logical and practical and strategic thing to do. There's also fear and frustration that's very, very closely associated with that. And of course, no one really likes to be criticized or judged. Now, a good coach advisor, just the same as a good, I sometimes call myself a business therapist, but just the same as a good mental health therapist would be, they're not there to judge or criticize. They're there to help and support, to understand, and to help you make better decisions for your life. And that's exactly what a business advisor coach should do, help you develop better skills, better strategies, both yourself and your team, if that's appropriate. But they're not there to judge. They're there to to help. And so that if that is one of your fears or one of your frustrations, then again, you probably are not talking to the right coach advisor, or maybe you're not ready for one yet. So you need to look inside yourself, um, so that when you do engage someone, it's going to be a positive relationship both ways. And of course, business owners, their scarcest commodity is their time, particularly focused time. They're always too busy. And you ask business owners, have you made a business plan this year? And they might mumble something to the effect of, "Oh yes, of course." And then when you ask to see it, they point to their cranium and say, "No, it's all inside my head. But I do know what my numbers are for this year," and that's great, as they should. But often they haven't even had the time to put together a proper business plan. Again, it can be a one pager or just a top up from previous years. And that's an example that they're putting perhaps all their time and energy working in the business and not enough working on the business, which again is another reason why it might be good to have someone from the outside come in and sit down with you, even if it's only once a year or once a quarter. If there's no specific strategic problems you want to work on, maybe there's an accountability element or a touch base element or a planning element that someone else can help you with. So this is more towards guys like myself who are consultants. So I'll quickly run through this one. So to enable small business owners to engage, what are these challenges that we need to overcome? And we've touched on some of them. But I want you to look at this from your perspective as an owner. So obviously the fears about affordability, benefits, and value, we talked about that. They're very busy. And the other thing is business owners, you have to prove your worth. Now, when you're selling advice and coaching, it's an intangible product, right? And intangible products are the most difficult to sell because people can't see them, and you may give them your resume and your testimonials and your promises, but of course they still don't know if it's going to work for them. So that's the first thing. And again, we talked a little bit about that before. Because they're not just investing their money, they're investing their time, and that is one thing that will stop you moving forward. Often is you've got to be sure that the services you can provide are going to be time efficient as well as rewarding for the client, for the business owner. Um, and of course, we talked about being optimists or skeptical of others, and just as a general habit, business owners are they like to talk about their business in general terms, in terms of products and services. Particularly a customer, maybe they go to a trade show or something. They're usually happy to talk about the technical aspects of their company and their products and services, but they're very hesitant, and perhaps wisely, to talk about their businesses, which means that even when they've got a confidential advisor, other than, and even their accountants, they don't always tell their accountants the full financial story, for example. So that just gives you an idea. Now, there's various reasons for that, but it's a commonly the case. So there's obviously a reason for it. So it shows you that they are you have to work very hard to earn a business owner's trust and respect. And without that, you will be limited in how much you can help them and how successful that relationship will be. Okay, so let's talk about some of the positives. When after you work with a client, you've broken through those barriers, you've got them to trust you and work with you. They start to get a feel for what you can bring to their business. And again, the more you can communicate that in advance, the better. But of course, again, when it's an intangible, you can't tell them everything you're going to do, and it would probably be too much details for them to want to take in anyway. So you've got to show them as you go. So one of the things I usually try and make sure is we get some quick wins. But here's overall what business owners generally say after they've had a successful experience. They've experienced higher growth. Businesses that gain from an external perspective are usually able to scale and grow much faster, if that's what the business owner wants. But even if it's not their primary objectives, generally the business will run smoothly and they will gain from higher profitability that way. Anyway, like I say, it's almost impossible not to improve a business if you get the opportunity to bring an external perspective. Almost every business operates with some degree of inefficiency. There's usually a reasonable amount, somewhere between 5% of profit leakage. And again, it depends on the business, it depends on the circumstances, and the reasons and causes for the business profit leakage vary from business to business and industry to industry. But there's almost always an opportunity to pick some low-hanging fruit, to get some early wins. And of course, anything that's saved in over costing, over expensing within the business is generally dropped immediately to the bottom line. So it immediately gets converted from a cost into a higher level of profit. There's often a great sense of relief when the business owner eventually lets you in, whether they've got problems or they're looking at new opportunities. For example, I'm looking at working with a client right now who is in a particular industry that is very cyclical, and they've decided they want to stay within that industry, but they'd like to diversify through acquisition and bring on more products and services that are somewhat related, not entirely complementary. But the reason for doing that is to diversify the type of income they get and the type of profitability so they can ride through these cyclical periods better. So it's a very smart strategy. We're at the early stages. We're going to look at some of the business opportunities. But again, you can already see they've been thinking about it for a while. And although it's a very positive and forward-looking, there's no negatives to it. There's already a sense of relief. Okay, great, we've found someone who can help us, and that's often the case with owners because they're often under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress. And if they find someone that they can confide in with their business challenges, they and you are able to help them, which invariably you can, then they feel less stress and they feel more in control of their business overall. So regardless of the profitability, they feel like they're more in control of the business if you bring some good strategies to bear that they may not have come up with them by themselves, or they just might not have focused on, even though they knew they needed to improve in a few areas, they just didn't take the time. And having brought in an external partner to help them, they're now focused on actually making decisions and implementing strategy that perhaps they had intended to do for some time but hadn't got around to it. Obviously, the bottom line is important, and the profits performance of almost every business can be improved, as I mentioned. Personal success, and I think that's to me, very important as well. That's my personal opinion, of course, but it's what my clients want. And we know we're helping them on a personal level because we get them to prioritize their problems, challenges, but also their goals and objectives, right? And some of those are personal, which is perhaps to get more money out, to get more time, to have the business less dependent upon them, or to be sure that the business is sellable so they know their family is secure. That one's very important because very common for the greatest proportion of a business owner's assets as they get older is contained within the business itself, depending on the size of the business, depending how, the value of their home. In the old days, it was almost certainly the case the business is worth more than the home. Home prices are quite high now, so maybe it's not the same balance, but it's still a significant proportion of their wealth and often a very considerable proportion of the future retirement funds. So not something they want to blow up. And if you can help them feel more comfortable that they have a sustainable longer term business that can produce more profit, or a business that can be sold for is a reasonable expectation of being sold in the future for a reasonable sum of money, then obviously you can imagine that makes them feel a bit more financially secure and more able to, because their family may not know some of these details, but they may feel better as a result, or reassured in many cases. But of course, it's more than just personal success, it's also gaining a greater sense of satisfaction. Business owners are so busy in their business, they don't always give themselves credit for what they have achieved, even if they haven't perhaps achieved the lofty heights they once aspired to. the fact that they've survived and hopefully thrived, they should be extremely proud of that. And sometimes they don't have someone to reinforce that with them, and that's one of the simplest things you can do. Because again, let's not forget, within 10 years, two-thirds of businesses are no longer in existence. So if you're in business 10, 15, 20, 25, even 30, 40 years later, you clearly have done something right, and hopefully you've benefited financially from it over time as well. The other things about running the business more efficiently, and one of the ways you can see if a business has been well run is how good the owner and his other lead people in the company are at delegation. If people know their job and are empowered to do their job, and they do it well, and they know what they're doing, and they can bring forward suggestions and ideas to improve the performance and efficiency, that's a clear indication that you've got a well-run business. So a better delegation is a sign of improvement, a measurable sign of improvement of business. And of course, the more engaged and empowered the staff are, the more the business becomes less dependent on the owner, which has benefits for the owner. Of course, if the business can perform well without them, they can enjoy perhaps more vacation time, more time with family, more time with grandkids if they're getting older. But they also will probably have a more valuable and more sellable business as well. And then we touched on it. Maybe I should have put it a little bit earlier. Obviously, the stronger the business systems are the less the higher quality the business is, the more stable it is, the less vulnerable it is to shocks in the economy. Of course, every business is going to be affected by a negative economy. But if the systems are in place, things like the departure of staff, someone off on parental leave, someone off on an illness, there's less disruptions within the business. If the systems are strong, then everybody knows what this, and they're well recorded in things like standard operating procedures or better best practices. Then, of course, that is a fundamentally better business. So those are some of the benefits that the owner may have been doing himself, but can be enhanced by some external help and support.
Okay, Des, I'm going to jump in here. We have like 5 minutes
Yeah,
left.
we're on last.
Are you have just a couple more slides?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So very quickly, so I've touched on it in talking around how we work with owners. Let me start that one again. So let me just go through a simple way that how do we work with owners. Again, every situation is different, although there's a methodology. But again, somebody's wanting to make an acquisition is different from someone who's looking to raise financing, or someone who's looking to scale the business or improve the marketing, or improve client retention, or whatever it might be. So we obviously look at try and quickly review the business history, the current strategies, and any problems, and the results that the owner has had in the past, and any problems they're currently having. So help them clarify and prioritize those, and look at their future goals. We obviously want to balance the short-term and the long-term strategic benefits to the business, because again, business owners are like all of us, they like to see the results. So you want to make sure you can demonstrate that you're on the right track by getting some early wins. And often we can do that by recovering some profit leakage and identifying some of the causes of that, which often are obvious but just haven't been looked at. And some of them are obviously more complex. And then going forward, you're giving them more practical insights and advice that can affect the future opportunities and boost efficiency, scalability, and growth. So that's my presentation over. It's a broad subject, but I think hopefully it's given you, whatever stage you are in your business ownership's journey, that be be mindful that you can't do it all yourself. You will need to leverage. That's leverage your talents with those of staff if you have them. If you're more of a solopreneur, you may need to use some strategic partnerships, lean on virtual staff or new staff. But wherever you are in your business, hopefully this has given you some pause for thought that, yeah, there may be times when I need to look outside of my current resources, my current staff, and get some general or specific business coaching or advice. And I would be very surprised if it doesn't benefit you as an individual, and of course, almost certainly benefit your bottom line. If you would like to talk to me about any of these things further, you know where to reach me. The details are on the screen, of course, but I'm also open to any questions if we have time, Laura. Thank you.